Hello. So last week we finished Pirkei, the fifth chapter of Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, part of the Mishnah, which was compiled, edited around the year 220. And originally there were only 5 chapters in Pirkei Avot. And what happened is today you pick up any text of Ethics of the Fathers, and you'll see there are 6 chapters. What's the deal? So the deal is that sometime during the Gaonic period, the Gaonim were the rabbis who were the main religious and spiritual leaders of the Jewish community in Babylonia after the period of the Talmud. So if the period of the Mishnah goes up to around the year 200. From about 200 to about 500, we have the period of the Talmud. Then there's a period of maybe 100, 200 years of people who were further editing the Talmud. Around the year 700, 800, 900, we have what's known as the period of the Gaonim. A Gaon, G-A-O-N, in modern Hebrew often means a genius, but Gaon were, again, the leaders of the Jewish community in Babylonia. Remember, at this period, from around 500 to 1,000, there were 2 main centers of Jewish life, the land of Israel, but the more significant one was in Babylonia. And each of those 2 places, the land of Israel and Babylonia, produced their own Talmud to the Mishnah, their own Gemara, their own discussions, debates, elucidations. Today, you could study what's known as the Yerushalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud, although it really is a misnomer. It didn't come out of Jerusalem, but for whatever reason, it was called that. And then there's the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud. When we just say Talmud, we're generally referring to the Babylonian Talmud, which is bigger, it's more edited, it is the one that is studied more regularly and significant. Although scholars will often go back and say, okay, we understand what the rabbis, the scholars in Babylonia thought about the Mishnah. Let's check and see what the scholars in the land of Israel thought. So on a higher level, people will study and refer to the Yerushalmi, the Talmud Yerushalmi, what's sometimes called the Palestinian Talmud or the Talmud of the land of Israel. Okay, so we're dealing with the period of the Gaonim, and around then there became a tradition. The tradition was that in the weeks following Passover up to Shavuos, that every Saturday afternoon, people would study a chapter of this particular book, Pirkei Avot. It was a way of bringing people together. Remember, just around this time of the year, the clocks, later, clocks changed. So it was, there was more time on a Saturday afternoon as opposed to the winter when Shabbos would be over by 4:30, 5 o'clock. So now when Shabbos goes much later, people were looking for something appropriate to do. And one of the things that they came up with is that you should study on Saturday afternoon. Well, what should we study? So the tradition came that between Mincha, the afternoon service, and Mariv, the evening service, which ends Shabbat with Havdalah, the idea was that we would have something during this period of time from after Passover until Shavuos. In the Saturday afternoon, we'd study 1 chapter a week. Well, somebody figured out that after Passover until Shavuos, there's actually 6 Saturdays. So somebody said, well, Pirkei Avot is a great thing to study. It's ethical literature. You don't have to, be a real scholar like you do with the rest of the Mishnah and the Talmud. Anybody really could learn Pirkei Avot. Wouldn't it be wonderful if there was one more chapter to get us through the one more week between Passover and Shavuot? Also remember that Shavuot is Man Matan Toratenu, the time of the giving of the Torah. And since much of Pirkei Avot is geared towards Torah, living a life of Torah, studying Torah, teaching Torah, this seemed like the perfect, and because it was accessible to more people, this was the perfect book to study. But we're short 1 week, 1 chapter. So what did they do? They said, what if we could find another chapter that we could add to Pirkei Avot? It's not really part of Ethics of the Fathers, but we'll attach it. And that way we have something to study on that 6th week between Passover and Shavuos, which is the time of the giving of the Torah. So what did they do? They searched around, and there's something called the minor tractates of the Talmud. There are 63 sections of the Mishnah. Many of them have a Talmud concerning them. The Talmud is edited, it's printed, but there are smaller sections which aren't technically considered part of the Babylonian Talmud, and they were called the minor tractates. I believe there's 15 of them. One of them is called Kala, which means bride, and deals, as you can imagine, with the laws of marriage. And there's a section of Masechet Kala called Kala Rabati, the larger part of this these teachings. And one of them has another name. One of these chapters in Kala is called Kinyan Torah, literally the acquisition of the Torah. In other words, how do you acquire Torah? How do you learn Torah? Okay? And in other words, it's besides Kinyan Torah, the other name for this chapter that they took from the minor tractate of Kala, and they pulled it and added it to Pirkei Avot, is sometimes called the Baraita de Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir is one of the great rabbis in the generation after Rabbi Akiva, so it's the second half of the 2nd century. And a Baraita is an Aramaic word which means outside. And a Baraita were teachings from this period. In other words, from the 1st and 2nd century and the beginning of the 3rd century, a Baraita were teachings from that period which weren't included in the Mishnah. By including them in the Mishnah, it's almost saying these are sacred. These are being canonized. But there were a lot of teachings that weren't included in the Mishnah. We didn't just dump them. They were sort of semi-sacred, and so they became known as Braitot, a Braita or plural Braitot, outside teachings. In the Talmud, you will find that in addition to discussing the Mishnah, they quote almost on every page in the Talmud, they quote Baraitot, because these were, for the rabbis of the Talmud, earlier teachings that were critical in them understanding the Mishnah and the period of the Mishnah. Okay, so we now know why we needed another chapter, where we got this other chapter from, the contents of this other chapter, Kinyan Torah, how to acquire the Torah. What does it mean to learn Torah? What does it mean to teach Torah? Okay, so one of the things about chapter 6 that differs from what we've seen already is the chapter seems shorter, but each of the teachings seems longer. Before, we usually had a sentence, 2 sentences, and that constituted a Mishnah, because remember, when the Mishnah was edited, it needed to be memorized. So when you were going to memorize something, as short and as pithy a statement as you could make, that's what we needed. But here, this wasn't created for that purpose. These were just outside the Mishnah teachings, and so many of them are much longer than what we're used to. And a number of them will be attributed. Some of them are just anonymous. So let's dive in and let's see what's going on. Kinyan Torah, the chapter of How to Acquire Torah, or the Braita of Rabbi Meir. So we start, if you're in the Sidur, we're on page Lev Shalom, Lev Shalem, it's in page 258. And by the way, just if you look in any prayer book and you want, and if it's a traditional prayer book that has Pirkei Avot, where is it going to be? It's going to be stuffed in between Saturday Mincha, the afternoon service, and Saturday Mariv and Havdalah, the Saturday evening service, because that's precisely where you went, when you studied it, right? In those 6 weeks between Passover and Shavuos, between Mincha and Mariv, that's when you would study. Today, if you came to our shul on a Saturday afternoon, what we would do is there's usually a word of Torah from the rabbi and then a song from the cantor. Back in the good old days, 3 months ago, we would have leftover cookies and coffee and soda. In a more traditional shul, they'll often have a little bit more of a meal, herring and, other things as well. But that's where you'll find all of Pirkei Avot between Mincha and Mariv in the Sidur, because that's where you studied it. Okay, so chapter 6, let's call it Mishnah number 1, or Aleph, even though technically it's not a Mishnah. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, Kol ha'osek b'Torah, anybody who engages in, who studies, who busies himself, b'Torah, in Torah, lishma, for its own sake. You might study Torah because you were forced to. You might study Torah because you need the degree in order to get a job teaching Hebrew school or something like that. Maybe there was a time where you needed to study Torah to get a draft exemption, to stay out of the army. Who knows, right? But what he's telling us is they're studying it because it's what should be learned and studied, and other people who study it with an ulterior motive. Rabbi Meir is telling us those who study Torah lishma, for its own sake, right, and not for any other purpose. Zocher, that person merits Dvarim harbe. You will get many things. Well, what's the reward for studying Torah for its own sake? There's no prize, there's no certificate, there's no degree, there's nothing. It seems that there's nothing that you're going to get out of it. Why should I bother committing myself to hours and hours of the learning and the study of Torah if I'm not going to get something from it, right? So here we have this very interesting issue of why do you do what you do? Because there's a utilitarian purpose. It's going to ultimately get me something. If I'm a teacher and then I go for my master's plus 30, right? It's going to bump me up in my, how much I'm going to get paid. Do I really care about this course? Is it going to make me a better pedagogue, with my students? Is it going to, enlighten my life? Maybe, maybe not. You want to know the real reason why I'm getting my master's plus 30 is because I'm going to get paid more, right? That's how many people would look at it. From the Jewish point of view, you study because there's nothing more important in life than learning, Torah, learning what God wants from us. So you might think you're not going to get anything out of Torah, but Rabbi Meir tells us, actually, you will zocheh, you will merit dvarim harbe, many things. It's not money in your pocket, right? But there are intangible things, spiritual rewards that you will get from studying the Torah. And then we have this long paragraph telling us what they are. I broke them down and I counted them, and I come up with 29. Okay, so there are 29 things, dvarim harbe, many things that you will merit by learning and studying Torah. Now, whenever I see a list in rabbinic literature, in Jewish literature, I always have to count, because I'm always interested in, are there significant numbers? Am I going to find, for instance, you might think, oh, wouldn't it be interesting if there were 18 things, 18 being, an important Jewish number, or 10 or 7, right? Those are significant Jewish numbers. 29 doesn't work. So I'm led to believe, have I counted wrong? Is it possible that some of the things that I put as individual, rewards that you would get, maybe they should have been combined as one thing and I read it as two? That's always a possibility. Or maybe the original Rabbi Meir, maybe he did come up with a particular number, but over a course of time, people said, oh, he forgot this, and they added, and that screwed up the whole number symbolism, right? So that's possible. Or maybe he wasn't thinking about number symbolism at all. And maybe he simply sat down and said, I'm reviewing my life and I'm thinking about all the ways that Torah, what I got out of it, what I got out of studying, right? And this is my list, 29. Sorry, it wasn't, 36, or it wasn't 18, or it wasn't 10. This is what I came up with. Okay, great. So let's look at his list. Before he gets to the list, he says, Velo od. And not only that, not only will you benefit from many, many things, Ella, but rather, Shekol ha'olam kulo. It was worth creating the world for their sake alone, for those people who study Torah. Shekol ha'olam kulo kedai hulo. That it's because of people like you who study Torah that the world exists. Now, maybe, he's saying God would have wiped us out. God looks down, is not happy with us, what we're doing, but God looks down and says, you know what? Here, there's a small group of people who are learning Torah. Because of them, I'm going to let things slide. I'm going to keep the world going because of them, those who study Torah. So that's a bigger reward. Not only do you get the 29 things, the world's going to continue to exist. And if it were not for you studying Torah and getting these things, God would said, forget it. I'm wiping them all out. There's no reason to continue on. Okay? So here we go. Number one on my list, as I figured it, is Nikra Rea Ahuv. Now, here's an example of how do you count. In this version, it says Rea Ahuv, and it's translated as you become a beloved friend. In other versions of what's going on, it's not one thing, a beloved friend, it's two things. You are a Rea, you are a friend, you become a better friend, and you are Ahuv, you are beloved. Now, if this translation is correct, and if indeed this is one thing and not two on the list, Rea Ahuv, as opposed to Rea and Ahuv, then my list gets knocked down to 28. 28 might be significant because in Gematria, 28 symbolizes Koach. Kaf meaning 20, Chet meaning 8. So the word Koach has the numerical value of 28. So something that has 28 things is strong, is powerful. That's what Koach means. So maybe there is something to be said for a symbolic number. If you study Torah, you become a Rea Ahuv, right? A beloved friend. Meaning what? Well, on the one hand, God looks down and God says, somebody who bothers to read my book, seriously, I love that guy. He's going to be a friend of mine. You become one of God's friends. And that's not a bad thing to be. Or another possible way of interpreting this is you become a Rea Ahuv by studying Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, right? What have we learned? We learned about friendship. Just for an example, remember several weeks ago, we learned what do you do if your friend, if one of his immediate relatives dies? Do you go right over or do you give him space? What do you do if your friend has been humiliated in some way? Do you go right over and try to comfort him, or do you give him some time before you go over, right? What do you do if your friend has just made a rash vow? Do you go over and challenge him about it, or do you give him some time to let it sink in what he's done and how he might or might not choose to get out of it, right? So indeed, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, has taught us how to be to each other a better friend, a beloved friend, right? Maybe that's what's going on. Okay, we're moving on. Then it says, studying Torah also makes you an Ohev et Hamakom. You love a lover of God. A lot of us walk through life and we've got a chip on our shoulder. We've got I've got a case to pick with God. I don't like the way he's running things. I don't like what he's done to me or my people. So maybe by learning Torah, we broaden our horizons. We understand God a little bit more. Maybe we have more sympathy for God, what he has to go through. And maybe that by studying Torah, seeing it from his point of view, not just from our point of view, we become a Ohevet Hamakom, one who loves God. Not only does studying Torah help you to become a lover of God, it helps you to become an Ohev et ha-briot, a lover of humanity. Briot from the word bara, Bereshit bara Elohim, in the beginning God created. Briot literally means creations, and it could mean humanity, that's what they say here, but it also could be, towards animals, living creatures. So the idea of not mistreating an animal or your pet, that would be Ohevet ha-briot, but also how you deal with other people that you don't know, that you become better that way. You become a lover of humanity by studying Torah. Then, misameach et hamakom. Misameach from the word simcha, one who causes hamakom, God, to rejoice. You are a joy to God. This is fascinating because we know, and from the wedding service, under the chuppah, we talk about God as being misameach chatan vekala. God is the one who brings joy, who helps the bride and groom to rejoice. So we get it, how God could misameach us. But here we're told by studying Torah, you misameach God. You can make God smile. You can make God rejoice. How do we do that? Well, just like we said before, by somebody, who buys God's book, and God gets the royalty check and realizes, hey, somebody's cares about me. Somebody's reading my stuff. I feel better about that. Okay? Or the fact that God, who was so upset with what other people are doing, is now happy when he realizes there are people not only studying Torah, but living Torah as well. So once again, you could be misamech et hamakom and misamech et habriot. Studying Torah helps you to bring joy to other people, right? The idea that you learn what people need, what the right thing to do is, and by doing it, you're making other people happy, and that's a pretty significant thing to do. Okay, we're moving on. Umal bashto anava v'yira. It clothes you. It helps put clothes on you, the clothes of anava, of humility, and yira. Now, once again, is this two things or is this one thing, right? It's almost like you put on a robe, right? Or you're wearing a costume or particular clothing that represents, who you are, what you're about. When you put on a ball gown or you put on a tuxedo, it sort of says, okay, I'm changing who I am and I'm fitting into a particular attitude or mood, and wearing that tuxedo, I'm gonna think in a certain way, act in a certain way, talk in a certain way. You don't put on a tuxedo or a ball gown and then go change the tire, okay? So studying Torah, in a sense, is a robe. It's a kind of clothing. It's dressing. And what is the clothing that you're wearing? It's one of humility. If you study Torah, you realize you're not the be-all and the end-all. You're not God. You realize you better have some humility. And remember, at the beginning of Pirkei Avot, we're taught if a person remembers these things, who you are, where you came from, right, where you're going, you came from a putrid drop of semen, and you're going to end up food for worms. If that doesn't make you humble, nothing will. So the study of Torah can certainly bring you to that. And what's the flip side, of humility? It's yira, reverence. We've spoken about this concept, not fear, not that you're afraid of God, but that you are in awe of God. So by studying Torah, you realize this is the God who created the world, who knows everything that's going on, right? And you're all of a sudden, you are in awe of the Creator. Okay, we're moving on. Umach shirato lihiyot, and it koshers you, from the word kosher, makes you fit, right? And the Hebrew word here is umach shirato. So the ma at the beginning of the word is the Hebrew grammar for the causative, right? It will cause you to, then the three-letter root is kasher. It will cause you to be kosher, and then the ending to is the suffix, meaning, cause that person to become, equips them is the way they translate here, but it makes you fit, lihiyot, and then it lists four things. And again, we don't know, are we talking that these are four different things on the list, or is this one thing, that by studying Torah you become A, B, C, D, or 1, 2, 3, 4? We don't really know. So you can count it anyway. At any rate, the idea is that you weren't kosher, but by studying Torah, you become kosher. Now, what do we mean by that? Kosher simply means fit, right? And, something is fit. If something was treif, something wasn't kosher, you can make it, in some cases, you can make it kosher. For instance, a utensil, right? If you put it in boiling water, you can make that kosher from treif to that utensil into something that's kosher. So you were treif, but you could be made kosher. How? By studying Torah. And what does it mean to be made kosher? And so we hear these four different things, and we've seen these four different terms used before in Pirkei Avot. Number one is a tzaddik. It will kosher you into studying Torah will kosher you into being a tzaddik. Now, what do we mean by that? In Yiddish, when we say somebody is a tzaddik, we mean a holy person. Often, Hasidic rebbes are referred to as a tzaddik, right? But the word in Hebrew literally means righteous. What does righteous mean? What does it mean to be righteous? It means you do more good than you do bad. Everybody does bad. But if you are a tzaddik, then you do more. We're told on Yom Kippur, God puts your sins in this cup and your mitzvahs on this cup of the balance scale. And if you're just this much over, you are called a tzaddik, right? You can still have a lot of bad things you did, but if the good outweighs it, you are a tzaddik. But in Yiddish, when we say a tzaddik, we're talking about somebody who never does anything bad, somebody who is, a holy man, okay? So that's number one. You were treif. By studying Torah, you can become a tzaddik. Not only can you become a tzaddik, you can become a chassid. Now, the word chassid, in the 12th century, 13th century, there were a group of Jews in Germany called Hasidei Ashkenaz, the pious people of Ashkenaz. This group attempted through asceticism, through fasting, through purification rituals, they attempted to become holy people. In the 18th century, the Israel Baal Shem Tov creates a movement called the Hasidic movement. And these were people who Baal Shem Tov was interested in saying to them, you don't need to be a scholar, that if you pray with feeling and if you rejoice in what God has given you, you can be a chassid. And so all the Jews who thought, I'm a second-class Jew because I'm never going to be a yeshiva bocher, I'm never going to study, I'm never going to be brilliant, Baal Shem Tov said, no, you can be a chassid, you can be pious. How? That when you pray with intention and fervor. And you try to do every mitzvah that you can. So, even the Chabad today, what do they teach? Yes, they would like their people to go to yeshiva and study Talmud. But for the rest of us, you know what? You put on tefillin, you did that one mitzvah. Isn't that wonderful? You're a woman, you lit candles on Friday night. Isn't that magnificent? Right? Everybody can aspire to that level. So that's what, in the 13th century, in the 18th century, even through the 21st century, when we talk about a chassid, that's what we're talking about. But when Rabbi Meir uses the word chassid, he's talking about somebody who goes beyond what's required of him. A tzaddik does a little bit more good than he does bad. A chassid tries to be pious, that he doesn't have to lend that person on the street money, but he chooses to. He's going beyond the call of duty. That's what a chassid is from the Talmudic, the rabbinic point of view. You don't have to wear the black hat and the payas and the long black coat. You can still be a chassid to Rabbi Meir. Okay, next we've got yashar. You can become, what is yashar? You know the word yashar koach. Koach again meaning strength, power. Yashar means straight. It's a well-known joke in Israel that you're lost and you ask an Israeli for directions and he will tell you, yashar, yashar, just go straight. Right? He probably has no idea where he's sending you, and it's probably a left and then a right and then go around and another 3 lefts. But the Israeli on the street is going to tell you, yashar, yashar, just go that way. You'll find it. Yashar means straight. When we say after somebody has an aliyah, right, we don't say congratulations, we don't say mazel tov, we say yashar koach, meaning the power, the strength that you have, either physical or intellectual, may you continue to use it to go the straight and narrow path in the right way. That's what yashar koach means. So we're told that if you learn Torah, it will help you to be yashar. Yashar in the sense of doing the right thing, going straight. Okay? How is that different from being a tzaddik? Hard to tell, but the idea is that knowing right from wrong. I've got two roads diverged in a yellow wood. Which one will I take? The bad path or the good path? Well, the good path is always to be yashar, to be a person who is straight, to do the right way. And then the next one is ne'eman, is faithful, trustworthy. From the word ne'eman, the 3 letters that you see in there are aleph, mem, nun, which is amen. Okay? Amen is basically when somebody says something, you say, I agree. Count me in. Ditto. That's what amen means. So ne'eman is somebody who is, yes, he's a ditto person. He is a follower. Okay, he's trustworthy. He also believes. Amen, also from the word emunah, which means belief, faith. So you will also be ne'eman. You will be trustworthy. You will be faithful. If you've studied Torah, you will know what people expect of you, and you will have the power and the strength to be able to do what's required of you, right? So that you are faithful. Then, umerachkatu min hachet, right? It will, from the word rachok, it will make you, it will separate you. It will keep you far away from min hachet. Chet, we all know, al chet shechatanu lifanecha, right? For the sin. So studying Torah will keep you far from sin. How will it do that? Either you'll read the punishment in the Torah for that particular sin, and you say, I thought I was in for something, some fun and happiness, but I see if I get caught, what it could cost me, no thanks, forget about it. Maybe that's what's involved. Or maybe you didn't know right from wrong. And now studying Torah, it teaches you right from wrong. So ultimately, you will stay away from wrong. And the flip side of umarach katu min hachet, keeping you far from sin, is umekarvatu lidei zechut, and it will bring you close to merit. Okay, so the opposite, by studying Torah, you will learn what is good, and it will push you, sort of nudge you into doing what is right, either because, oh, look at the reward for being good, or now I know what's right and I'm going to do it, not because of the reward, just because it's the right thing to do. Okay? V'nehanin mimenu, and we're told people benefit. Another thing from learning Torah is v'nehanin mimenu. People will benefit from them, from you, with your eitzah and tushiyah. Eitzah is the Hebrew word for advice or counsel. In Yiddish, people use the term eitzes. Do you have any eitzes for me? Do you have any advice for me, what I should do? And tushiyah here is understood, translated as skill. Okay, so that if you learn Torah, you're going to be smart enough to be able to guide other people. People are going to come to you and say, you're a pretty smart guy. You're somebody I trust. You're somebody who's a moral exemplar. Tell me what I should do, right? So people are going to come to you for eitzah and tushiyah, for all the skills that you have acquired. Not only that, but for your binah, your understanding, and for your gvura, for your physical strength. Okay, and where do we get this from? Now, once again, there's 4 things mentioned here: eitzah, tushiyah, binah, ugvura. So in this case, are we talking about 4 different things that you get, or is it one thing? These 4 things are somehow connected and interconnected, so we only count them as one. Again, nobody is sure, but that's a possibility. Shene'emar, and now we're going to quote a verse, right, to prove what he just said about these 4 things. And from the book of Proverbs, chapter 8, verse 14, it says, Li eitzah v'tushiyah, ani binah li gvura. So first of all, notice that in that sentence, you have these 4 things: eitzah, advice or counsel; tushiyah, skill; binah, understanding; and gvura, strength. So we need to look at the verse, what's happening in chapter 8 of the book of Proverbs. So, okay, Proverbs probably written sometime after, according to the rabbis and the traditional view, the book of Proverbs is written by King Solomon, which would be around the year 900 BCE. And Solomon, in his great wisdom, wrote all of this. But modern biblical scholars say that's a nice story, and maybe there's even a few things in the book that might have originated with Solomon, but whole sections, whole chapters of the book of Proverbs are actually part of wisdom literature. Okay, what is wisdom literature? There was a genre of literature in the ancient world, in the Greek world, certainly in the Jewish world, of what's called wisdom literature. And the time period is probably 400 BCE, 300 BCE, 200 BCE, in that particular period. And perhaps the Jewish world was much influenced by the Greek, the Hellenistic world, and about all the, whether it's Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, all the great wisdom teachers of Greece. And there was a genre of wisdom literature among the Jews. From approximately this time, it probably originated not as religious literature so much, but as secular guidance for rich people. If you were a wealthy person at that time among the Jews, your kid was not a farmer, right? Your kid was not going to go out and work with his hands. Your kid was going to be sent to a tutor, and he was going to learn, wisdom. He was going to learn important things that could help him in life. By the way, one of the things in wisdom literature is stay away from a married woman. It'll get you killed. Stay away from women of ill repute, right, who are on the street corners trying to entice you, right? That too could get you sick and maybe even killed. So that was one small part of wisdom literature. Another part of wisdom literature are, here's the truths, the eternal truths, the universal truths that you should learn and that you should incorporate into your life. And again, this was probably more of a secular, upper class literature. What happens? 300, 400 years go by, and the rabbis read this literature, and while they agree with all of its teachings, stay away from the married woman, things like that, don't steal, okay? What they disagree with is the secular nature. So that whereas in the book of Proverbs, you will have chapters like chapter 8, in which wisdom, with a capital W, wisdom talks to the people and says, you want to listen to me, wisdom, and I will tell you what's right and wrong. When the rabbis get this, they say, we like what wisdom has to say. We don't like the idea that it's wisdom with a capital W who's teaching this. This should be Torah with a capital T, or God with a capital G who's teaching us this. So that's exactly what happens. The rabbis reread, the book of Proverbs, and instead of it being a secular upper class, textbook, it's now a religious textbook meant especially for the common people. Okay, so we see that verse, and then we continue with the things. V'notenet lo, by learning Torah, it will also give you the following things: malchut umemshala v'chikur din. Okay, sovereignty with authority and the power of keen judgment. So again, is this one thing? Is this three things? Is it two things? Impossible to know in terms of our total number, right? Whether we're 29 or maybe we've reduced it, to some significant number. How does Torah give you malchut? From the word melech, kingship. Maybe ultimately, not today when the Romans are oppressing us and persecuting us, but maybe ultimately we'll get, by living a life of Torah, we ultimately will be able to defeat our enemies and be sovereign, will be independent, will be powerful. Nobody will push us around anymore. And that all comes by virtue of our virtue, of our righteousness. So you will have malchut and memshala. Malchut means that memshala, you will be in charge, okay, of your own fate, not left to somebody else. V'chikur din, having powerful, keen judgment. Din, from the sense of a dayan, a judge. If you are in charge, then you make the laws. You're the one who decides innocent or guilty, not some foreign power. who's picking on you. Okay, so study of Torah perhaps can lead you to this kind of reward. And then we're told, umegalin lo, and studying Torah, it will be ultimately revealed to you, razei Torah, the secrets of Torah. You want to know what the secrets of life are? You've got to commit yourself to study. And it doesn't happen by one day I'm going to open up the book to the right page and the secrets there. The secrets of Torah are only discovered and revealed to you by study and study and study and going deeper and deeper. Remember what we learned at the end of last week's class, hafoch ba v'hafoch ba, turn it over, upside down, investigate, examine it, go deep, right? That will ultimately lead you to knowing secrets of Torah. It's not something that's whispered in your ear one day. You discover it by hours and hours and hours of study. V'ne'esa, and then you will also become kema'ayan hamit gaber. Here they translate an effluent fountain. You may remember we saw the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and one of them was this spring that is constantly growing stronger. From the depths of the earth, the water shoots up, and it doesn't just dribble up, but mitgaber, from the word gvura, becomes powerful and strong. It's the image of, you strike oil and you see the oil shooting out. Well, similarly, learning Torah will become a source of wisdom and knowledge to you that continues to grow and get stronger. Not only that, you will become like a nahar, like a river, she'eno posek, which never dries up. Remember, in the land of Israel, there were many rivers that during the summer, they dried up, the wadi, the dry riverbed. And only in the winter, when the rain comes and the snows melt later from Mount Hermon and come down the Jordan and into the Kinneret, and then down the Jordan and spread out through other underground and overground, rivers and sources, you don't have your water source drying up like you do in the land of Israel. So here we're told if you study Torah, your water source, water is equal to Torah. It will never dry up. It will always be there. Okay? So 2 very powerful images of water. One, a vertical one shooting up from down below, and the other, a horizontal one, the river that continues to flow. Then we continue, v'hevei tzanuah, you will also become modest, and erech ruach, and patient. Study of Torah makes you modest. Modest is a little different than humble, which we've already seen. Modest is also not only the way you dress, so that you're not revealing your body, but the way you talk and the way you think about yourself and other things as well. So you become modest and patient. Torah teaches you patience. Perhaps it teaches you patience because in order to learn Torah, you must be patient. It's sitting, it's not just reading, it's learning. And that teaches patience. And then we come to umochel al elbono. If you are modest, if you are patient, you will also be forgiving of insults given to you. You know the word mochel, salach lanu, mechal lanu, kaper lanu. Forgive us. The idea, it's another way of saying forgiveness. So mochel, you will forgive people who offend you, who mock you, who insult you. Torah makes you realize that there are more important things, and that responding to a small person and the stupid things they say is not really important. And then finally, the end of the Braita is umegalatu, and it will magnify you from the word gadol, yitgadal, umeromamtu, and it will exalt you from the word ramah, the idea of high, bring you up high. Al kol hama'asim, will bring you up over all other things that have been created. So here we see the first Braita of Perek Vav, chapter 6, and the 29 or less, depending on how we're going to count, things, the rewards that you get from the study of Torah. And as such, Torah is something that's very difficult, but there's nothing more worthwhile to do in our lives. So we'll pick it up next week with the second Braita.